Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a land where the air is thick with incense and Nile breezes, and the twilight seems painted in ochre and violet, ancient Thebes, heart of Egypt. You're lying on a stone bench outside the palace, the coolness seeping through your linen clothes, watching the silhouettes of palm trees against the glowing sky. Temple bells echo in the distance, and priests shuffle by, muttering invocations to gods you'd need a spreadsheet to keep track of. The city is alive with subtle sounds, sandals scraping sandstone, a soft chorus of frogs down by the river, and that familiar hum of people quietly trying to avoid work after sundown. It's easy to imagine this as a golden age unless you're actually there swatting at mosquitoes and hoping the crocodiles keep to their own side of the river. Reality check. Even if you made it past the wild dogs and into the palace, you probably wouldn't survive a week without a sunburn, a stomach bug, or some minor misunderstanding involving sacred cats. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and your local time in the comments below. I love knowing where everyone is dozing off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun's last rays catch on the whitewashed pillars of Hatshepsut's palace, turning them golden and then blue as the night rolls in. You trail through the outer gardens, careful not to step on the lotus ponds, and inhale the blend of sweet myrrh and something faintly like last week's fish. Thebes hums with anticipation. You sense a change in the air, a low buzz running through the people, like static before a storm. Somewhere deep inside, the royal family is gathering. Hatshepsut, not yet pharaoh, waits in her private chamber, half-shadowed, restless. You imagine her a woman in her mid-20s, clever eyes, strong jaw, braided black hair, adorned with gold thread. She paces, pausing at an open window where the Nile reflects the first stars. Below, the city lights flicker torchlit streets, busy docks, marketplaces packing up for the night. Even this late messages from distant provinces arrive written in hurried, angular hieratic. Couriers fan themselves grumbling about sand in their sandals and how it always gets everywhere no matter what. One of the mainstream facts you can't escape Egypt is for the first time in generations without a true adult male pharaoh. The old king Thutmose III has died. His son by a lesser wife, Thutmose II, ascended, but was sickly and frail. The succession line is a tangle as complicated as a bureaucrat's tax scroll. Hatshepsut, daughter of a king, wife of a king, and now widow of a king, stands in a uniquely awkward position. Her stepson Thutmose III is technically next in line, but he's just a child, and Egypt is not a patient land. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut immediately plotted her rise or was reluctantly pushed by tradition and necessity. Either way, tonight marks the slow, inexorable turn of fate. You overhear the low hiss of advisors debating succession, the shuffling feet of priests nervous about which god to side with, and the not-so-subtle eavesdropping of royal servants who really wish people would talk louder. The atmosphere in the palace is tense, but you notice quirky details, a royal cat perched on the grand staircase licking its paw as if it alone controls Egypt's destiny. An old gardener hums to himself, whacking dead lotus flowers with more enthusiasm than strictly necessary. The kitchen smells of honey cakes and a suspiciously experimental batch of lentil stew, no doubt destined for some poor courtier trying to impress Hatshepsut with his culinary daring. As you slip closer to the audience chamber, you see scribes preparing scrolls and paints, recording every whispered rumor, because in this city, gossip is basically a full-time job. Lamps flicker along the limestone walls, their golden light picking out painted murals of gods and kings all lined up and judging the living. Tonight, you're not a pharaoh or priest, just a curious soul drifting through the turning gears of history. Hatshepsut stands in the shadows, her mind already racing ahead, considering the priests, the generals, her family, and what tomorrow will bring. Maybe she's planning her next move. Maybe she just wishes the air conditioning had been invented already. A lone cricket chirps defiant and slightly offbeat as the Nile glimmers with secrets. And through all this, you realize the world is about to change quietly with barely a ripple. One woman poised on the edge of legend readies herself to tiptoe or stomp into Egypt's future. The twilight deepens, the palace grows hushed, and you're right there feeling the city breathe in, waiting to exhale. Inside the dim-lit palace, torches cast long shadows on the painted pillars, scenes of pharaohs conquering Nubia, jackal-headed gods, and of course the eternal parade of dignified ducks. You move along the cool limestone floors, feeling the tremble of anticipation that courses through the staff. Tonight, the air is thick, not only with incense, but with whispers. Some servants bustle about as if nothing's happening, refusing to acknowledge the palace's nervous energy, while others cluster in corners, trading the latest theories on who will emerge as Egypt's true ruler. Spoiler, very few bets are on a woman. Hatshepsut, meanwhile, is still in her chambers, adjusting her elaborate collar, lapis, and turquoise gleaming at her throat, a subtle nod to the gods, but also perhaps a silent assertion of her own authority. You catch her reflection in a polished copper mirror, serene, but with a glint of stubbornness. She steps out, head held high, shoulders squared, channeling centuries of royal tradition while subtly rewriting it. You walk with her through the palace halls, your sandals barely making a sound on the floor mosaics. The ancient capital pulses with uncertainty. In the audience chamber, Egypt's high priests await arranged like chess pieces in their best linen. You can't help but notice that the priest of Amun, by far the largest god on the scene, seems to be eyeing Hatshepsut as if she's about to borrow his lunch money. Tonight's mainstream fact: Hatshepsut is about to do the unthinkable, crown herself pharaoh, not just regent. It's a power move worthy of any modern boardroom, only with more gold jewelry and slightly more risk of being chased by hippos. The tension in the air could be cut with a knife, or at the very least, a very sharp reed pen. The ceremony begins. Musicians thrum lyres, a chorus of temple singers wail somewhat off-key if you're being honest, and priests recite prayers old enough to have expired milk named after them. You try not to sneeze as clouds of incense roll by. Frankincense and myrrh, the ancient world's answer to Fabrizi. Hatshepsut ascends the steps, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. In a move that will make the history scrolls for millennia, she places the double crown upon her head. You hear a collective gasp ripple through the court. Some mouths hang open so long you wonder if they'll ever close again. The official title is Grand Matkare, which means truth is the soul of the sun god Ra. It's a mouthful, but hey, you're royalty. You can have as many syllables as you want. A quirky detail: the royal cobra on Hatshepsut's crown, called the uraeus, seems to be a bit larger and angrier than usual tonight, as if to signal, yes, this is happening. Deal with it. Somewhere a cat yowls in protest, perhaps realizing that tonight history's about to change, and no one asked for its opinion. In the back rows, some courtiers are shifting uneasily. A few, convinced the world is ending, make secret gestures to ward off bad luck. One fellow even tucks a garlic clove behind his ear, just in case. It's not just gender that's controversial. Hatshepsut is leapfrogging an entire cultural order. Historians still argue whether her claim was sheer ambition, political necessity, or a cosmic act of divine right. The priesthood is uneasy, particularly the powerful clergy of Amun. Some mutter about omens, others about legal precedents. One scribe with ink-stained fingers tries to remember if there's a word for Pharaoh Hess, or if they'll have to invent one by breakfast. You realize that this isn't just about leadership. Egypt's entire idea of itself is up for negotiation. Amid the pomp and the grumbling, Hatshepsut's supporters cheer loyal generals pounding their staffs on the floor, creating a sound like distant thunder. But you notice the sideways glances. Nothing in the palace escapes the wall's attention. Rumors swirl already. Will she rule alone? Will she co-rule with young Thutmose III? Will the gods themselves intervene and send down a memo? Even as she accepts the scepters and makes the ritual gestures, Hatshepsut is rewriting the script, adopting the male regalia, the false beard, and the language of Son of Ra. It's a royal drag show Egyptian edition, and not everyone knows how to react. You can't help but smile at the scene, half the palace in awe, half in denial, and at least 3 people still wondering if they left the oven on. Quirky fact: Egyptian rulers sometimes wore scented cones of perfumed fat on their heads during ceremonies, which would slowly melt and make the wearer smell like a human bakery by the end of the evening. You glance at Hatshepsut, no cone tonight, but you're pretty sure someone is eyeing the spice cabinet for next time. As the ceremony winds down, the audience disperses, some to congratulate, others to plot, most to gossip. The moon rises high, casting a silvery glow on the palm-lined avenues. You hear the distant sound of drums from a festival by the river. Back in her private garden, Hatshepsut sits in silence for a moment, tracing her fingers along the ancient stone bench. You sense the gravity of the night settling on her shoulders, heavier than any crown. She breathes in deeply the scent of lilies and cool water mixing in the night air. There is no turning back now. The city waits, and so does history. The first female pharaoh in centuries stands poised at the edge of a new chapter, and you for now can only watch as the wheels begin to turn slow and inexorable beneath Egypt's endless stars. Your sandals brush the cool flagstones as you move with the earliest rays of sunlight, weaving through the hush of the palace before the daily clamor begins. In the courtyard, orange trees glow gold, their scent mixing with the always suspicious aroma from the royal kitchen today, perhaps overambitious barley bread, or yesterday's roast goose, making a second appearance. You slip past dozing guards, their spears propped haphazardly as they snore through yet another shift. Being a palace guard sounds impressive, but you've noticed most of them are actually experts at pretending to be awake. Dawn over Thebes is a spectacled pink light slipping over the city's mud brick rooftops, the Nile shimmering like a sheet of hammered bronze. Hatshepsut's reign has begun, and every corner of the palace buzzes with a new, wary energy. You drift past corridors lined with vibrant frescoes, so many blue lotuses and strutting ducks that you wonder if the court artists ever had a day off. Mainstream fact: the pharaoh's daily schedule is a relentless parade of ritual ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and of course, endless feasting and exhausting performance requiring both political savvy and a strong stomach. The day begins early, always with offerings to the gods. You step into the sun-drenched temple where priests mutter incantations, swinging heavy bronze censers, their faces slick with sweat despite the hour. Hatshepsut stands at the altar, calm and steady, her voice low and melodic as she pours milk wine and a little honey onto the shrine. The air thickens with perfume and the promise of divine approval. There's a quiet joke among the junior priests that the gods are probably bored out of their minds with all the porridge and barley beer, but you keep this to yourself. You're here to observe, not to start a theological crisis before breakfast. After prayers, the palace comes alive. Courtiers in crisp linen scribes with papyrus scrolls, foreign envoys nervously waiting to present tribute and hoping the palace cats ignore their expensive feathered hats. In the reception hall, Hatshepsut receives her advisors. Senenmut, her trusted architect and rumored confidant, is always there, tall, clever, a little too smug for his own good. He presents plans for a new garden. It will feature shade trees, cool pools, and perhaps, he says with a sly wink, a spot for royal contemplation away from nosy courtiers. Quirky detail palace fashion is wildly competitive. The more beads, the higher your status. And if you can wrangle a leopard skin cloak, you're basically a celebrity. You see one official whose kilt is so starched it could double as a weapon, and another courtier trying desperately to keep his elaborate feather headdress from falling into his morning beer. Historians still argue whether the palace's strict routine was Hatshepsut's way to maintain order or simply an inherited tradition no one dared change. Either way, there's a rhythm to these days' offerings, council meetings, architectural inspections, and when the Nile breeze is gentle afternoon, strolls in the papyrus gardens. You follow Hatshepsut into the scribe's chamber, where dozens of young men and women bend over fresh papyrus, their reed pens scratching out edicts treaties, and inevitably lists of which cats are to be fed the palace's finest fish. Cats, of course, rule the palace as much as any pharaoh. One orange tabby sprawls across a state document, daring anyone to move her. You think she'd make an excellent Minister of Foreign Affairs, given her diplomatic ability to ignore everything. The day's first audience begins. Ambassadors from Nubia, their hair braided with gold rings, present carved ivory and rare incense. Hatshepsut nods graciously, eyes sharp, noting every twitch and hesitation. Her mastery of statecraft is clear, and even her critics grudgingly admit she handles foreign policy with a magician's skill. She negotiates trade deals over sweet wine and dates, knowing exactly when to smile and when to let silence work its magic. Somewhere in the palace, a festival is being planned. Musicians tuning harps, dancers arguing about the right number of ribbons, cooks muttering about the price of garlic. You join Hatshepsut in a quiet moment, sitting in a shaded alcove, her sandals off feet dangling above a koi pond. "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear for a day," she says softly, watching a dragonfly skim the water. You want to tell her that vanishing is impossible when the entire palace moves at your command, but you keep quiet. Ruling Egypt is a performance, and everyone, pharaoh included, must stay on stage. A gentle breeze stirs the palm leaves. Laughter drifts up from the kitchens, where a new dessert-sweetened goat cheese has sparked both delight and confusion. Next, someone will try to fry lotus petals. Hatshepsut mutters, smiling just a little. As afternoon slips into golden evening, the palace fills with music, laughter, and the smells of 1,000 spices. You watch the queen move through her world, quick to smile, quicker to judge, but always in motion. Court life is dazzling, but it's also relentless. The feasts are grand, with tables piled high, roast duck honey cakes, fruit dripping with syrup, and inevitably someone reciting a poem about onions that really doesn't need to be that long. A mainstream fact. The royal court kept detailed records of everything from grain shipments to dreams reported by the high priest's cousin's neighbor. One fringe tidbit. Some believe the palace had secret passages for discreet midnight strolls or emergency exits in case of overly enthusiastic relatives. Historians still argue whether these stories are real or just creative cover for servants sneaking out for midnight snacks. As the sky purples, you retire with Hatshepsut to her private chamber. She removes her crown, her posture relaxing as the weight of Egypt slips off, if only for a few moments. The palace outside is never silent. Crickets sing, cats bicker, and someone is always plotting just a little. You feel the pulse of the kingdom steady and strong beneath the marble and gold. You lie back, drifting in the softness of evening, soothed by distant music, and the knowledge that tomorrow the whole dance will begin again, offerings, counsels, gossip, and the slow turning of history under a queen who wears her crown with poise and maybe occasionally a bit of mischief. A thin veil of incense curls in the air as the first light of morning finds you wandering past columns painted with gods and scenes of endless harvests. The world outside is waking, but the heart of the palace is already pulsing with the silent, invisible machinery of power. You hear a chorus of temple boys, their voices just a shade flat, reciting the same hymns they've probably mumbled since they could walk. The sound is oddly comforting, like a lullaby for grown-ups who are expected to run an empire before breakfast. The palace is preparing for a spectacle, and you can sense the weight of myth gathering in the corridors. Today, you're drawn to the grand hypostyle hall, where the stone is still cool beneath your feet, and the air tastes of old stone and anticipation. Hatshepsut is at the center of it all, draped in linen so fine it almost glows. She is surrounded by high priests, artists, scribes, and a few courtiers who, let's be honest, would sell their own mothers for a better seat at this event. Mainstream fact: Egyptian pharaohs didn't just claim divine favor, they often claimed outright divinity. Hatshepsut, ever the innovator, decided she wasn't simply chosen by the gods. She was the daughter of the god Amun, a fact that, if it weren't so heavily repeated by priests and carved on every available surface, would seem suspiciously convenient. You watch as the head priest, with his beard more oiled than a festival goose, recites the official story. On a moonlit night, the great god Amun visited Hatshepsut's mother, and the result was a child destined to rule. The crowd pretends to be awed, and you try not to snicker. Historians still argue whether the common folk actually believed this, or just went along for the free bread and beer at festivals. Artists get to work immortalizing this story in stone. You wander among them, admiring their skill as they chip away at blocks of sandstone, carving Hatshepsut's miraculous birth into the walls. There's even a scene where baby Hatshepsut sits in the lap of the gods, looking suspiciously chubby and content, like she's just finished a feast instead of being anointed by immortals. The paint is bright, the gestures dramatic, and you spot one apprentice doodling a tiny cat in the corner because apparently every era has its bored teenagers. A quirky tidbit: priests sometimes staged magical performances for the public illusionist tricks with snakes and smoke, meant to reinforce the awe of the royal family's divine power. One old priest beard twitching with amusement, lets you in on the secret. It's all in the wrist, really. And the audience's willingness to believe. You're tempted to try your own sleight of hand, but decide it's safer to stick to observing for now. The last thing you need is to be accused of magical malpractice. As you circle the crowded hall, you catch fragments of hushed conversation. Some are awed, some skeptical, and a few are just annoyed they missed breakfast for this. So, she's really a god's daughter, a courtier, whispers. If she starts sprouting wings, I'm moving to Punt. The palace cats, meanwhile, are unimpressed as ever. One is licking spilled wine off the steps, radiating a kind of divine nonchalance. You trail after the queen and her entourage as they process to the Great Temple. Here, the official propaganda machine is running at full steam. Scrolls are distributed recounting Hatshepsut's sacred birth. Priests chant, artists paint, and you can almost hear the collective groan of stone workers realizing they'll be carving this story into walls for the next several decades. Historians still debate if the people at large truly bought into these tales, or if they simply played along to avoid being volunteered for crocodile dung sunscreen duty. As the day lengthens, you slip outside to find a little peace. The sun is warm on your back, and the breeze smells faintly of myrrh. You find Hatshepsut in a rare private moment, watching as an artist sketches her profile. She holds still, then grins when the artist gets her nose just a bit wrong. Maybe I am the daughter of a god, she jokes, but I wish the gods had given me a smaller nose. You snort with laughter, which earns you a look from a nearby priest. Oops. In the distance, the city's ordinary life continues. Children play in the alleys. Merchants haggle over baskets of figs. A group of old men argue about whose turn it is to pay for beer. For them, the queen's divine origin is a story told at festivals, an excuse to eat and dance, and for one night, believe in miracles. But within the palace, the myth is deadly serious fuel for authority, a bulwark against critics, and a never-ending font of official pronouncements. As the afternoon fades, Hatshepsut is led to the sanctuary for a private rite. Only the closest priests are allowed inside, and the rest of the court hovers just beyond the veil, straining for a glimpse or a whispered clue about what really goes on. You press close, listening to the murmurs. She's asking the gods for rain, one says. No, she's asking for another obelisk. Another replies, earning a round of skeptical snorts. The truth is, no one knows. And that's exactly how Hatshepsut likes it. Quirky fact, the queen's favorite perfume is a blend of lotus cinnamon and something the perfumer refuses to reveal. Some say it's crocodile oil, but you're pretty sure that's just a story made up to sell more perfume to nervous courtiers. As the stars begin to appear, the day's rituals wind down, and you find yourself lingering at the temple threshold. The queen's divine story is woven into every corner of palace life, from the grandest fresco to the lowliest kitchen tale. It is both shield and sword, protecting her from rivals, elevating her above the ordinary, and reminding everyone that in Egypt, power and myth are never far apart. The halls grow quiet. The incense fades, and you slip back toward your own chamber, wondering what new stories tomorrow will bring. Outside, the Nile flows silently beneath the moon, carrying the secrets of gods, queens, and ordinary mortals alike, each one part of the vast tapestry of Egypt's eternal night. You wake to the sharp clink of stone on stone temple masons, already at work, in the first blush of dawn, chiseling away under the disapproving gaze of early morning ibis. The palace is alive with anticipation. Hatshepsut has summoned her architects, and even the cats seem to sense something monumental is brewing. The scent of wet limestone mingles with the sweeter perfume of acacia blossoms as you drift toward the construction grounds, ducking around laborers who look far too awake for this hour. Mainstream fact, Hatshepsut's reign was a golden era for builders. The queen, perhaps a little obsessed with grandeur, launched a spree of construction projects that would reshape the skyline of Thebes. Temples, chapels, and most famously obelisks rose as proof of her ambition and perhaps her need to outshine every ancestor and rival combined. You stand in the shadow of Karnak Temple, where plans for yet another obelisk are being unfurled on a reed mat, and the chief architect is already muttering about deadlines and sand in his lunch. There's a feeling of organized chaos. Overseers bark orders in rapid-fire Egyptian, and everyone seems to be arguing over the best way to move a 40-ton block across the sand without flattening half the workforce. You hear more than one laborer swear he saw a team of priests blessing the ramps with crocodile dung for good luck, call back anyone, though others insist it's just for grip. You step aside as a train of oxen lumbers past, towing sledges packed with granite from Aswan, a journey of hundreds of miles across sand and water, just to satisfy the pharaoh's taste for the spectacular. Quirky tidbit: ancient construction crews had motivational beer rations. On the hottest days, extra suds were handed out to keep spirits high and grumbling at a minimum. One old stonemason tells you with a wink that the secret to a straight obelisk is 3 beers before noon and a good friend to catch you if you wobble. You're not sure whether to believe him or call the ancient equivalent of OSHA. You pause to admire the sheer insanity of carving a single obelisk from a granite mountain, then floating it downstream without snapping it in two. The scale is dizzying, and you feel suddenly small as the work gangs chant in rhythm ropes, groaning the obelisk slowly inching upright. Hatshepsut herself appears, her linen robes trailing her eyes, sharp and calculating as she consults with Senenmut. They talk measurements, star alignments, and inevitably where to find more blue paint for the dedication scene. Historians still argue whether these building projects were purely for religious glory, for cementing her legacy, or a carefully calculated way to employ thousands and keep the nobility too busy and tired to stir up trouble. Whatever the motive, the results are breathtaking. The Queen's obelisks, including the famous one at Karnak, were the tallest ever erected in Egypt at the time, dazzling needle-pointed monuments that seemed to pierce the sky. You trail behind the Queen as she inspects the temple's new colonnade. Artists are already painting the capitals in bright reds, yellows, and blues, while a couple of daring apprentices try to sneak in a doodle or two. That one's supposed to be a baboon, you overhear, but it looks like Uncle Neb. The Grand Foreman sighs and rubs his temples. Construction in Egypt, some things never change. Later, Hatshepsut addresses her workers, promising gifts and blessings from Amun if the project succeeds. The laborers cheer, whether for Amun or the extra bread, you're not sure. You sit beside a group of young builders sharing stories. One time, says a grizzled old man, an obelisk cracked. The Queen herself came down, scolded the stone, and it fixed itself out of fear. Everyone laughs, but the story will no doubt grow with each telling. After all, in Egypt, exaggeration is practically a sport. As the sun arcs higher, you find shelter under the scaffolding, watching as the obelisk's capstone is hoisted into place with ropes, sweat, and a prayer to every god on the books. The work is endless, the stakes high, and even the palace cats keep their distance when the stone starts to sway. Historians still debate the true purpose behind the flurry of construction. Was it divine inspiration, personal insecurity, or a brilliant bit of economic policy? Maybe a little of everything. What's certain is that Hatshepsut's building spree left an indelible mark. Even the casual visitor like you can't help but stare up at the soaring pillars and glittering obelisks, feeling the pull of history and ambition, reaching up, up, up into the endless blue. Dusk finally comes, painting the half-finished colonnades gold. You slip away from the dust and clamor, pausing at the base of a towering obelisk, still warm from the day's sun, inscribed with prayers to gods, queens, and the everlasting kingdom. You trace your fingers along the carvings, feeling a connection, not just to Hatshepsut, but to everyone who labored here, dreamed here, and left their own small mark on eternity. And as the shadows lengthen, the palace slowly returns to quiet, and you walk home with dust on your feet and the taste of adventure on your tongue. You can't help but wonder what Hatshepsut will dream up next. One thing is certain, under her reign, Egypt is always under construction, always reaching for something just beyond the clouds. You find yourself at the bustling quayside, morning sun already hot on your shoulders as the Nile's breeze carries hints of exotic spices and far-off promise. Today, Thebes feels restless, and so do you. The whole city is abuzz. An expedition is preparing to set out Hatshepsut's great adventure, the legendary voyage to the land of Punt. Merchants argue over provisions, scribes tally cargo, and you spot a fisherman trying to convince a palace official that his rare river fish deserves a spot on the manifest. Spoiler, it does not. Mainstream fact: Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt stands as one of the great achievements of her reign. You move among shipbuilders as they lash together planks with papyrus rope, their hands stained with resin, and their language far saltier than anything in the Nile. Egypt, land of the river and desert, rarely ventures far by sea, but today dozens of sleek vessels wait their prows carved into the shapes of wild bulls and birds. The entire enterprise feels equal parts ambitious and reckless, a bit like trying to paddle to Paris on a pool float. You board the flagship with the other courtiers, your nerves humming with anticipation. At the dock, Hatshepsut herself appears, bidding the sailors good fortune, her voice steady, even as the wind threatens to snatch her words away. Her trusted right hand, Nasi, leads the charge, consulting endless lists: gold, frankincense, myrrh, panther skins, baboons, incense trees. You wonder who's in charge of counting the baboons and if they get hazard pay. The crew, half-seasoned sailors, half-nervy landlubbers, pushes off. Oars slice the water in rhythmic, almost hypnotic strokes. You're soon lulled by the slap of waves, the creak of timber, and the low singing of rowers. Not for the first time, you wish you'd remembered your sea legs. A scribe nearby turns a slightly greenish shade, muttering about regretting last night's festive lentil stew. Quirky tidbit Egyptian sailors sometimes wore strings of garlic and crocodile teeth to ward off seasickness and allegedly cursed mermaids. You eye the garlic with envy. Days blur into a cycle of oars, wind, and the endless blue. Some sailors try their luck fishing, others carve good luck charms from driftwood. The river widens, the current grows strong, and the reeds along the banks tower above the boats. One night, lightning flashes over the southern horizon, and the crew huddles together, swapping stories about the spirits of the river. You're not sure if you believe in haunted crocodiles, but you keep your toes inside the boat just in case. Historians still argue whether the journey to Punt was truly as grand as the reliefs suggest, or if later scribes gave the tale a little extra sparkle. But as the days pass and the expedition finally leaves the familiar Nile behind, you're swept up in the mystery. The air grows warmer, thicker, with the promise of rain. The trees look stranger, their shapes spiky, and unfamiliar birds shriek overhead, and one baboon escapes, sending the cargo handlers into chaos. You help chase it down, rewarded with a look from Nessie that says if you lose another one, you're rowing home. At last, after weeks at river and sea, Punt appears on the horizon, a lush green land, unlike anything in Egypt. The scent of myrrh blossoms rides the air, and the people of Punt greet the Egyptians with cautious curiosity. Their king and queen are regal, adorned with ostrich feathers and intricate jewelry, their courtiers bearing gifts, incense, ebony, precious woods, live animals. You watch as Hatshepsut's envoys and the locals negotiate in a patchwork of gestures, gifts, and the occasional pantomime involving an overly enthusiastic goat. Quirky fact: the Egyptians described the Queen of Punt as having unusually large features and being robust. The reliefs at Deir el-Bahari show her in loving detail, suggesting she was a celebrity in her own right. Palace artists in Thebes would later argue for days over how much to embellish her, with one suggesting she deserved her own festival. The days in Punt are a whirl of trading, exploring, and let's be honest, envying the locals' far superior sunscreen. You try roasted myrrh nuts, acquired taste and dance awkwardly to the music of reed pipes. The Egyptians gather incense trees and cuttings to bring back for Amun's temples. There's an air of accomplishment and relief. The hardest part is over, except of course for getting everyone and everything back home in one piece. The voyage home is slow or heavy, with treasure, incense, and enough stories to last a lifetime. There are inevitably a few mishaps, a baboon escapes again, sailors run out of beer for exactly 3 hours, a near mutiny, and someone tries to cook fish over a lantern, filling the ship with smoke. Still, spirits are high, and you watch the green shores of Egypt reappear with a surge of pride. Historians still debate how much of Punt's wealth really made it home, and how much was lost to sandbars, storms, or enterprising sailors with sticky fingers. But when the expedition returns, the city erupts in celebration. Hatshepsut greets her sailors with garlands of lotus and acacia. The people cheer, and the temples overflow with new offerings. You can still smell the myrrh in your hair as you stagger exhausted onto solid ground. That night, you collapse on your reed mat, lulled by the Nile's lullaby and the lingering heat of adventure. Somewhere outside, the baboons chatter in their new home. The incense trees sway, and Thebes sleeps dreaming of distant lands and a queen who dared to sail farther than any pharaoh before her. You wake to a chorus of street vendors outside the palace walls, their voices competing with the bray of donkeys and the laughter of children. The Nile glimmers beyond the gardens, loaded with new arrivals, boats heaped with treasures, and exotic animals brought back from the voyage to Punt. The city is alive with the giddy aftershocks of success. You drift through the busy marketplace, sidestepping baskets of mer baboons on tethers and the occasional peacock strutting like it owns the place. It feels like everyone in Thebes is carrying something unusual, and no one seems quite sure what to do with a crate of live incense trees. Mainstream fact, under Hatshepsut, Egypt blossomed into a trading superpower, its markets overflowing with foreign luxuries. Punt's bounty transforms the city gold, ebony, ivory, and spices fill the storerooms, and priests bless every shipment as a gift from the gods. The treasury clerks work overtime, tallying the loot, their abacuses clacking like cicadas. You wonder if they ever lose count and just fudge the numbers, trusting that no one can tell one baboon from another after a long day. You pass through the temple courtyards where Hatshepsut's PR machine is running at full tilt. Heralds proclaim her wisdom and divine favor. Scribes sketch her likeness in every new mural, always taller, always grander, sometimes with suspiciously good hair. Priests host incense-laden ceremonies, inviting crowds to give thanks for the safe return of the fleet. You watch as Hatshepsut dedicates the finest treasures to Amun, the god who, according to palace myth, also happens to be her celestial dad. No one's quite sure where to look when she says it with a straight face. Quirky tidbit, a rumor sweeps through the palace that one of the baboons from Punt is actually an enchanted prince, cursed to bark and steal fruit until the right queen breaks the spell. You hear two kitchen girls debating whether Hatshepsut will bother with the rescue or just commission a really expensive leash. You slip into a storeroom following a pair of overexcited scribes who nearly drop a jar of cinnamon worth more than its weight in silver. The storerooms are an olfactory maze, incense, honey, cedar, wild resin, and just a hint of monkey fur. A group of accountants argue over how to record a payment in giraffe tails. Just put miscellaneous, someone sighs, and you suspect it's not the first time. As the trade boom ripples through the city, so does its impact. Nobles redecorate their villas with foreign woods and strange perfumes. The palace kitchens experiment with new spices, producing a dish so pungent even the cats refuse to taste it. You stumble into a makeshift bazaar set up by entrepreneurial priests hawking authentic Punchian charms. One stall sells dried figs labeled as blessed by a baboon's sneeze. It's not clear if this is a miracle or a marketing ploy, but the line is long. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut's economic policies were carefully calculated or a lucky result of successful expeditions. Either way, Egypt's coffers swell and the queen's prestige soars. Meanwhile, foreign envoys arrive daily bearing tribute and awkwardly worded letters of admiration. You watch as one nervous ambassador bows low, presenting an ostrich feather and nearly knocking over a sacred lamp. The queen smiles gracious as always, but you can almost hear her thinking, at least it's not another baboon. Within the palace, the wheels of propaganda turn without pause. Hatshepsut's victories are carved into temple walls, described in poetry painted in broad dramatic strokes for all eternity. Her scribes invent new titles: Mistress of the Two Lands, Bringer of Myrrh, She Who Outtrades Them All. You note that she also approves a slight edit to her nose on one mural, just a touch more regal, a little less courtyard gossip. You wander out to the construction yards where artisans are now using rare woods from Punt for temple doors and furniture. Makes the place smell better, one carpenter jokes, and deters the mice. Hatshepsut inspects the progress, complimenting workers and taking notes for her next big idea. The queen's enthusiasm for new materials inspires everyone except perhaps the palace budget officer, who quietly wonders if there's such a thing as too much luxury. Quirky detail, Egypt's new taste for foreign pets becomes a minor fad. For a brief, ridiculous week, several nobles compete to teach their pet monkeys to play Sinet. The result is chaos with more broken boards and spilled wine than actual gameplay. One monkey even wins, but only because it ate the last piece. You return to the palace gardens where the queen relaxes in the shade, listening to musicians play flutes carved from rare Puncheon reeds. She laughs as a gardener brings her a fig tree sprig, promising her own crop of fruit in just 10 years or so. The sun sets over Thebes gold and crimson, and for once there's a sense of contentment, success shared, and tomorrow's worries kept for now at bay. Still, you sense the undercurrents. Whispers in the night. Will the prosperity last? How much is too much? Do the gods approve? Historians still debate whether Egypt's golden age under Hatshepsut was built on genius luck or a perfectly timed combination of both. For now, the only thing that matters is the gentle perfume of myrrh on the wind, the distant laughter of palace revelers, and the knowledge that for a while at least Egypt wants for nothing. You curl up in your bedchamber, the smell of cedar and spice lingering as you drift to sleep, dreaming of distant lands, overstuffed storerooms, and the peculiar challenge of teaching baboons to play board games. The palace feels different these days, more crowded, more vibrant, filled with new faces and old secrets. You find yourself navigating winding hallways where laughter and rumors echo, and where beneath the careful order of court life, the mysteries of the royal family swirl. Somewhere in the midst of it all, a soft clink of glass and the flicker of a lamp mark the late-night comings and goings of one man more than any other Senenmut, the queen's trusted architect advisor, and the subject of gossip almost as extravagant as Hatshepsut's building projects. Mainstream fact Senenmut rose from modest origins to become one of the most powerful and enigmatic figures at court. You watch as he glides through the palace, papyrus scrolls tucked under one arm, his eyes always scanning, calculating, plotting. He is tasked with managing Hatshepsut's greatest works, from her sprawling mortuary temple to secret chambers that only a handful may ever enter. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was everywhere at once, a human whirlwind in sandals. Courtly life revolves around rituals, but behind closed doors, relationships are far more complicated. Hatshepsut's family is a tangle. Her late husband Thutmose II is gone. Her stepson Thutmose III remains in the background, growing, but still sidelined. And then there's Senenmut, always present, always discreet, and just mysterious enough to keep the rumor mill turning faster than the Nile in flood season. Quirky Tidbit Senenmut was given the rare honor of having his own images and name carved near those of the royal family, almost unheard of for someone not born into royalty. You stumble upon one of these hidden portraits behind a pillar, his profile oddly distinguished, and if you squint, maybe just a little more handsome than reality. Palace artists have their favorites, it seems. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut and Senenmut's relationship crossed the line from professional to personal. Some point to the graffiti found near his tomb, a stick-figure queen, an advisor drawn by a cheeky stonemason, holding hands and surrounded by hearts. Others argue the pair were simply a team bound by ambition, loyalty, and the shared dream of building something eternal. You decide it's best not to ask. In Egypt, some questions are answered only with a sphinx's smile. You walk with Senenmut through the palace's shadowy halls as he inspects blueprints by the light of an oil lamp. This arch, he mutters, should last 1,000 years, longer if the cats don't scratch it. You wonder how he finds the energy. He manages building projects by day, helps plan festivals by night, and somehow still finds time to teach the queen's daughter Neferuri her lessons. In a city where most officials can barely manage their lunch, Senenmut's efficiency is a minor miracle. Palace gossip, meanwhile, is relentless. In the servants' quarters, you overhear a debate about whether Senenmut's closeness to Hatshepsut is a blessing or a curse. He sleeps with one eye open, whispers an attendant just in case the gods or the other nobles get jealous. Another points out that he's so trusted, he even has his own tomb near the queen's temple, complete with star-painted ceilings. A tomb with a view, jokes a scribe, earning a round of laughter. In the quieter moments, you catch glimpses of Hatshepsut and Senenmut discussing matters of state, sometimes finishing each other's sentences, sometimes laughing at a joke only they understand. There's warmth there, but also caution, a shared recognition that power in Egypt is always a tightrope walk with crocodiles in every shadow. Quirky fact. Some stories claim Senenmut once commissioned a statue of himself as a scribe, holding a tiny swaddled Neferure on his lap part, tutor part, surrogate parent part, walking mystery novel. Palace pranksters occasionally dress up the statue in funny hats when no one is looking. You try not to laugh, but even the queen has to stifle a smile when she passes by. Historians still debate the meaning of all these clues. Was it love? Was it loyalty? Was it two overworked introverts finding solace in architecture and papyrus? You drift through the palace gardens, watching as Senenmut sketches plans for yet another reflecting pool, the queen nearby lost in thought. They talk quietly, plotting future projects, or perhaps just sharing a moment of calm beneath the fig trees. Night falls. Torches gutter along the colonnades as musicians play soft, sleepy melodies. The queen, for all her grandeur, sometimes escapes to the roof, with Senenmut both staring out at the lights of Thebes, the river's silver thread winding through the darkness. For a little while they are simply two people, ambitious, tired, hopeful, watching over a world they helped shape. As you drift off, wrapped in the palace's ever-present tapestry of rumor and reality, you wonder which version of their story will echo through the ages, the scandal, the partnership, or the whispered truth that maybe some legacies are built on more than stone. It's still dark when you slip out into the cool hush of pre-dawn, drawn by the promise of secrets and stone. The palace is quiet, the courtyards lit only by the glow of torches and the faint shimmer of stars above the city. Somewhere in the distance, a single ibis squawks, already awake and probably plotting to steal breakfast from an unsuspecting scribe. The Nile flows on a silent ribbon, reflecting the ancient lights of Thebes and the even older dreams of its rulers. You wander with Hatshepsut as she crosses the broad avenue of sphinxes, her linen robe trailing her mood, meditative. Today she visits the vast terraces of Deir el-Bahri, her mortuary temple, a project so ambitious and precise, it sometimes feels more like a declaration of eternal intent than just a home for her afterlife. Workers bow as she passes artists and architects following in her wake with fresh plans, brushes, and that harried look unique to people who work for royalty with a penchant for perfection. Mainstream fact, Deir el-Bahri stands as one of the greatest architectural achievements of ancient Egypt. Built into the sheer cliffs west of the Nile, it's not just a tomb, but a living, breathing statement of Hatshepsut's vision. Its grand ramps and pillared halls defy the ordinary, designed to guide both mortals and gods into the afterlife in style. You wander the echoing colonnades, running your fingers along reliefs of trade expeditions, divine births, and curiously, what might be the world's earliest depiction of a giraffe with a questionable haircut. Quirky tidbit. Some say the queen insisted on hundreds of Sphinx statues guarding the temple, each with a slightly different smile, one for each mood, or perhaps just a subtle dig at anyone who doubted her right to rule. There's a rumor that Senenmut hid secret messages in the masonry, little jokes and puzzles for future generations to find. You try to spot one as you wander, but are distracted by a cat chasing a beetle up a column. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut's mortuary temple was a pure act of piety, an unmissable flex to future rivals, or a clever way to tie her memory to the gods and the land. The truth, as always, is probably a little of each. The temple complex is a world unto itself, buzzing with priests, workers, and the occasional lost goat. Each terrace tells a story of conquest, faith, and a queen who never stopped reinventing herself. As the sun rises, casting gold across the cliffs, you join a group of workers hauling baskets of offerings, bread, beer, flowers, and jars of honey to the temple altars. The priests chant prayers that wind up through the colonnades, smoke curling toward the open sky. The rituals are endless, their purpose both practical and symbolic feed. The gods honor the ancestors, keep the universe in balance, and if possible, impress any visiting dignitaries with your dazzling altar arrangements. You pause to watch a team of artists repainting faded murals, one grumbling about the heat, another insisting that no, the queen really did have that many different crowns. Nearby, a pair of stonemasons compete to see who can carve the most realistic lion, each secretly hoping Hatshepsut herself will pass by and nod in approval. The palace cats patrol the worksite, ever alert for dropped scraps or a warm stone to nap on. One small ginger Tom is rumored to be the reincarnation of an old vizier, but you suspect he just has a talent for sneaking second breakfasts. A quirky custom to ensure a smooth afterlife. The queen's tomb, builders left tiny food offerings hidden in secret niches. One day, you spot a nervous servant stashing a loaf of bread behind a statue, just in case she gets peckish on the way to eternity. You're tempted to leave a note, "Remember, gluten-free wasn't invented yet." The structure itself is almost hypnotic. Long, graceful ramps climb toward the cliff face, flanked by perfect rows of columns. The sound of sandals on stone echoes softly. You linger in the temple's sanctuary, where cool shadows linger and incense hangs heavy, watching the sunlight creep in and slowly illuminate a painted scene of Hatshepsut embracing the gods. Historians still debate why she placed so much emphasis on her tomb and temple, especially given the political tension always lurking beneath the surface. Some say it was a way to prove legitimacy, others a bid for divine favor, others still claim it was a private act of faith. You suspect, watching the queen run her hand over a newly carved wall, that it's all of these a blend of power belief and the simple, deeply human desire to leave a mark. As evening falls, the worksite quiets. Offerings are cleared away, the cats gather for a last sunbeam, and Hatshepsut stands atop the highest terrace gazing out over her city. In the golden light, the temple seems almost to glow, a beacon, calling both gods and mortals to remember, to revere, to wonder. You walk home, the scent of dust and flowers clinging to your skin, thinking about all the dreams carved into these stones, stories of ambition, legacy, and the hope that even in eternity, someone will remember your name. The nights grow a little less peaceful as rumors start to slither through the palace like snakes in tall grass. You sense it in the way servants hush when you pass, in the sidelong glances between guards, in the tension that hums beneath the rhythm of daily life. Egypt's prosperity under Hatshepsut has inspired both admiration and resentment, and the city feels like a festival tent, straining at its seams, a little too bright, a little too crowded, and just one strong wind away from collapse. You join the queen for her morning walk through the gardens, the air heavy with blooming jasmine, and the distant shrieks of children playing by the river. She moves with the same poise as ever, but today you notice the way her gaze lingers on the palace walls, as if she's searching for cracks. A pair of generals approaches, bowing low, their greetings careful and rehearsed. One presents an update on border security trouble brewing in the south. Perhaps nothing, perhaps something more. Hatshepsut thanks them with a soft word and a sharp glance, a reminder that nothing escapes her notice, even if she chooses not to mention it. Mainstream fact: Hatshepsut's reign, though stable and prosperous, was not free from threats. Foreign rivals eyed Egypt's wealth with envy, and there were always murmurs of internal discontent. Old guard nobility, unhappy with a woman's rule, priests wary of the queen's power, ambitious family members thinking perhaps they could do better. In this environment, every festival feels double-edged. Every banquet is as much about politics as celebration. Quirky tidbit: to discourage assassination attempts, palace guards sometimes disguise themselves as gardeners, dancers, or musicians, each armed just in case trouble decided to crash the party. You witness one particularly earnest musician tuning his lyre with one hand and gripping a hidden dagger with the other, which might explain why his playing is frankly terrible. Historians still argue whether there were actual assassination attempts on Hatshepsut, or if the tales were simply palace gossip blown up by later storytellers. You do know this: the palace feels watched, every corridor echoing with secrets. One night, you're woken by the frantic whispers of a servant who claims to have seen a shadowy figure slipping through the library. The next morning, a particularly unpopular tax collector is suddenly transferred to the farthest possible outpost for his own safety. You get the sense that under the silken gold, the machinery of power is always whirring. You find Thutmose III, Hatshepsut's stepson, in the practice yard, sword in hand, practicing with a ferocity that leaves most sparring partners limping. He is no longer a child, and the rumors swirl about how long he will accept his stepmother's rule. The palace gossips mutter about alliances, who visits whose quarters, whose name is whispered most often in the darkest hours. Thutmose is courteous in public, always bowing deeply, always deferential, but you can feel the storm brewing behind his eyes. One day, in the midst of a festival, a commotion breaks out near the temple steps. A fight, a plot. No, just two officials arguing over the last honey cake. Still, the tension is real enough that guards swarm the area, their hands never far from their weapons. Hatshepsut laughs it off. If only all Egypt's problems could be solved with dessert. Her smile is bright, but you see how her fingers drum the arm of her chair, each tap a silent calculation. In the market, you overhear foreign merchants trading wild tales. One claims that a Libyan prince sent a love letter to Hatshepsut, another that a rival pharaoh has hired wizards to curse the queen's cats. Good luck with that, you think, remembering the palace tabby's savage reputation. Meanwhile, you see the guards have grown more vigilant, the palace gates more tightly watched, and even the sacred geese seem to waddle with a new sense of duty. Quirky fact: to ensure loyalty among her closest guards, Hatshepsut started a tradition of midnight feasts serving spiced wine and roasted quail while swapping stories and occasionally warning each other to check for scorpions in their boots. You're invited once, and the laughter is almost enough to drown out the sense that everyone is just a little too awake. Historians still debate the extent of real danger. Was Hatshepsut constantly under threat? Or was the fear itself a tool, an invisible shield to keep rivals in line? You find the truth somewhere in between, reflected in the queen's careful movements, her watchful counsel, her habit of walking the gardens at dawn just to see who is brave or foolish enough to follow. As weeks pass, you notice that Thutmose III spends more time with the army, his retinue growing, his voice carrying further in council meetings. There's no open conflict yet, but you sense the tension building like a Nile flood behind a dam. The palace remains a place of beauty and brilliance, but now you hear the soft click of armor beneath every linen tunic, and the laughter at dinner sometimes rings just a little too sharp. You end your day on the balcony looking out over the flickering city lights, feeling the pulse of Egypt in every breath. Thebes is peaceful for now, but beneath the calm, you know the story is changing. Hatshepsut's enemies, both within and without, are waiting, and you, along with the rest of Egypt, are holding your breath for whatever comes next. A haze of incense greets you as you enter the temple. Precincts the morning sun, filtering through the blue and gold columns and bathing the air in shifting sacred light. It's festival season again, and Hatshepsut's court has never missed an opportunity for elaborate spectacle or a little divine reassurance. You slip through the crowds past priests balancing heavy bowls of burning myrrh, the smell so thick it tickles your nose and makes your eyes water. The line between piety and performance blurs as the rituals begin. Mainstream fact: Hatshepsut skillfully wielded religion as both shield and scepter, binding the power of the gods to her own rule. The Temple of Karnak is alive today. Priests chant in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves as painted dancers spin in circles, dust motes swirling in the beams of sunlight. Hatshepsut appears in full regalia, the blue and gold crown gleaming, her arms outstretched as she pours milk and wine before the altar of Amun. The crowd bows as one a sea of linen and shaved heads. No one can ignore the message: the gods are on the queen's side. You linger near a table laden with offerings, fresh bread, figs, honey jars of beer, and at least one fish that looks like it regrets nothing. A pair of temple cats make their way through the feast eyes, half-lidded and utterly unimpressed by the spectacle. One knocks over a vase with deliberate elegance, as if to say, "Your rituals amuse me, but my dinner comes first." Quirky tidbit: the most devoted priests claim they can smell a bad omen, insisting the scent of burning myrrh will sour if the gods are displeased. You spot one priest holding his nose during a particularly smoky ritual, quietly blaming a junior acolyte's overenthusiastic fire-building skills. No omens today, just a lot of coughing. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut truly believed in her own divine status or simply played her part with exceptional skill. Either way, her image is everywhere, carved into temple walls, painted onto sacred shrines, cast in gold amulets. In some depictions, she is shown as a woman. In others, she takes the full regalia of a male king. False beard, broad-shouldered stance, the works. You watch as artisans touch up her likenesses with fresh blue and red paint, debating whether her eyes should be more mysterious or just less tired. The rituals are endless processions winding through the temple offerings, carried high priests reciting prayers old enough to make the sun itself yawn. The air is thick with incense and the faint sound of cymbals. Hatshepsut herself moves with practiced grace, never missing a beat. You overhear a priest joke that she could recite the hymns backward and the gods would still show up for dinner. Yet beneath the music and the pageantry, real power flows. The queen's ability to merge her rule with the god's will keeps both the priesthood and the people firmly on her side. Every offering, every chant, every statue of a god with the head of an animal is a small, careful stitch in the grand tapestry of her legitimacy. When a rival noble tries to raise questions about her right to rule, it is the temple doors that open wide and the priests' voices that drown out dissent. Quirky fact myrrh, that sweet and smoky resin becomes the signature scent of the queen's reign. Not only is it burned by the bucketful in the temples, but Hatshepsut orders entire groves planted around Thebes. In case the gods develop allergies, a scribe whispers, earning a glare from his supervisor. One courtier tries to create a myrrh cocktail for a banquet, but the results are politely ignored. Historians still debate just how much power the priesthood wielded. Did they truly shape policy, or did Hatshepsut keep them just close enough to share the glow of divinity while holding all the real strings herself? You watch the head priest and the queen exchange a look, a dance as old as Egypt, full of silent bargains and veiled threats. The rest of the temple carries on unfazed. Cats nap in the sun, children chase after butterflies, and the scent of incense settles on your skin like a blessing or a secret. As evening falls, the great doors of Karnak swing shut, the last prayers fade into the dusk, and Hatshepsut slips away to the quiet of her palace. There she washes away the perfume of ritual and breathes in the ordinary scents of home-baked bread, river water, the ever-present lotus flowers. For a moment, she is simply a woman alone, with her thoughts the weight of empire resting beside her on the pillow, silent and patient as a sphinx. You curl up as well, the scent of myrrh clinging to your hair, the echo of ancient chants humming you to sleep. Another day in Egypt's sacred heart, another day survived by faith, cleverness, and just a dash of well-placed showmanship. Your sandals echo softly as you wander the long colonnades, morning sunlight pouring in through painted pillars, illuminating reliefs of gods and kings, and everywhere images of Hatshepsut herself. The palace is abuzz with artisans, the stone dust in the air shimmering like gold, and you pause to watch a team of sculptors at work. Each is carving another likeness of the pharaoh, sometimes unmistakably female, sometimes fully dressed in the regalia of a king, false beard and all. The artists debate each detail in hushed voices, a running commentary on royal fashion and how best to chisel authority into stone. Mainstream fact, Hatshepsut's image was everywhere, statues, wall, reliefs, obelisks, each reinforcing her claim as pharaoh. You step into a storeroom where finished statues stand row on row, their faces serene, their bodies ramrod straight. Some look gentle, others stern. Some even manage to appear both depending on the angle. You try to spot the best side, but quickly realize that every side was carefully crafted to serve a purpose, power, legitimacy, eternity. The royal workshops are alive with the music of hammers and the scratch of pigment brushes. You watch as one artist carefully paints the queen's crown a vibrant blue. A bit more turquoise, another calls the gods like their pharaohs colorful. Quirky tidbit. The pigments were sometimes mixed with honey or egg, and you spot one apprentice sneaking a taste. He makes a face. Apparently, royal blue is not the delicacy he hoped for. You follow the queen's image across the palace walls sometimes as a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes even both in the same scene. Hatshepsut's reign rewrote the playbook for royal iconography. Historians still argue whether her dual representation was a practical strategy to secure her throne or a bold reimagining of gender and power that confounded her rivals. You notice one court scribe nose deep in a new roll of papyrus, muttering, "If she keeps this up, we'll need to invent new pronouns." The process of immortalizing the queen is unrelenting. One day, a foreign ambassador arrives carrying a tiny statuette from his homeland, a lioness queen, fierce and elegant. The palace artists crowd around debating whether Egyptian statues should smile more, or if that would just confuse the gods. Eventually, the ambassador's gift finds its place among 100 Hatshepsut statues, each vying to outregal the others. You overhear a group of painters joking about their side hustle, offering to touch up older pharaohs' statues to look more muscular or less balding for a small fee. In one corner, you spot a mural that's clearly been updated, the queen's chin subtly more prominent than last week. She's got a good side, an apprentice says with a wink, and she pays for it too. Quirky fact: in a chamber reserved for the most secret artistic endeavors, you discover a tiny relief hidden behind a door, Hatshepsut portrayed with a lotus flower tucked behind her ear, and beneath it, the faintest outline of a smile. It's a side of the queen the public never sees, playful, almost private. The master sculptor who shows you this whispers, "That's just for us." Everyone deserves a secret. As months pass, new statues are placed throughout the city temple courtyards, market squares, even near the palace kitchens, where a particularly plump statue becomes the unofficial guardian of bread. The people of Thebes get used to seeing their queen in stone, her calm gaze watching over everything from trade deals to the morning rush for fresh figs. Historians still debate just how much of this relentless self-promotion was driven by insecurity, by realpolitik, or by a genuine desire to leave a legacy. Whatever the reason it works, Hatshepsut's face is everywhere, her image blurring the line between reality and myth. You realize the artists themselves become a kind of silent court shaping memory with every stroke and chip. "We make pharaohs immortal," one says, and sometimes a bit taller too. As evening falls, the city's statues cast long shadows, their expressions shifting in the dusk. You wander the temple halls, the faces of Hatshepsut, gazing down, regal, serene, eternal. The palace quiets, and you sense the weight of so many eyes, real and stone, watching as Thebes drifts toward sleep. You tuck yourself beneath a painted frieze, the memory of color and laughter soothing you as you drift off. In a world shaped by stone and imagination, even dreams seem to take on sharper outlines. And if you dream in turquoise, you're simply fitting in. The scent of papyrus and damp stone lingers as you step through palace corridors that feel subtly different. Change is everywhere now, a ripple, a tension, the sense that something in the air has shifted just beyond your line of sight. Hatshepsut's statues still stand tall, the temples still ring with chants, but you notice servants moving a bit faster, guards standing a bit straighter, and officials eyeing one another with new suspicion. The golden age of calm, it seems, is quietly giving way to something more uncertain. You catch sight of Thutmose III more often. No longer the uncertain child you glimpsed in earlier years, he's grown into a striking young man, confident, sharp-eyed, his every movement radiating strength. He's been training with the army, his days now a blur of chariot drills and strategy meetings. You watch him spar in the courtyard, sweat glinting on his brow, every muscle tensed with a drive that goes deeper than ambition, the knowledge that he was born to rule. Those who once ignored him now cluster around, eager to see which way the wind is blowing. Mainstream fact: as Hatshepsut's reign matures, Thutmose III comes of age, preparing, some say, plotting for his own place on Egypt's throne. His following among the generals and old guard officials grows, and you hear whispers along the colonnades. Soon it will be his turn. In council meetings, his voice grows louder. He asks sharper questions, requests more reports from the provinces, and even once memorably interrupts a scribe's endless recitation with a pointed "enough." The room goes silent. The scribe turns pink, and you feel the palace tilt ever so slightly toward the future. Quirky tidbit: Thutmose is rumored to have an unusual collection of eyeliner sticks imported from as far as Byblos. Supposedly, he experiments with colors and patterns before battle. For intimidation, he insists, but the palace jesters quietly compete to see who can sneak a new shade into his kit. One day, you spot him wearing a striking shade of indigo, and you realize that in Egypt, fashion is sometimes the sharpest weapon. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut and Thutmose ever truly clashed, or if the transition was mostly a dance of appearances, outward respect, inward calculation. You're never sure. Sometimes you witness moments of genuine warmth, the two sharing a joke over dinner, Hatshepsut quietly correcting his form in archery practice, Thutmose bowing with real deference. At other times, the air between them seems brittle words layered with meaning, each gesture weighed and measured. Outside the palace, signs of transition accumulate. Hatshepsut spends more time at Deir el-Bahri, supervising repairs and quietly directing priests. Set and mute, once the ever-present shadow grows less visible, his advice sought in whispers rather than public. You notice new faces among the palace scribes and the council, a slow, deliberate turnover. He's gathering his own circle. An attendant murmurs, glancing toward Thutmose's wing of the palace. The festivals go on, of course. Egypt loves its pageantry. But where Hatshepsut once led every procession, now Thutmose sometimes rides beside her, waving to the crowds with a practiced ease. You hear old ladies in the market debating which pharaoh smiles better. He looks more like the old kings, one says, but she knows how to throw a festival. In a city ruled by tradition and gossip, that's about as close to a revolution as it gets. Quirky fact, Thutmose III commissions a set of miniature war chariots as gifts for the palace children. The rumor is that his favorite is a silver one small enough for a particularly adventurous cat to ride, which becomes the subject of several palace pranks. Eventually, the cat claims the chariot for its own, and the army's best driver is said to have been outmaneuvered by a tabby kitten. Historians still debate whether Hatshepsut willingly began to cede power, or if pressure from Thutmose's supporters forced her hand. You sense it's a bit of both. Power in Egypt is rarely handed over without a dance or ritual and at least one elaborate banquet. Behind the scenes, the paperwork increases, as do the carefully worded decrees signed by both rulers. You notice more shared statues, double cartouches on monuments, and joint dedications at the temples. One golden evening, you witness Hatshepsut standing atop her temple, the city spread below. Thutmose appears beside her, silent, both gazing out across the river. The moment is charged full of unsaid things. Eventually, she places a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of blessing farewell, or perhaps just a mother's pride. The sun dips below the cliffs, painting the world in soft pink and gold. For a while, neither moves the future held in delicate balance. You retreat to your own quiet corner, the distant sound of music and laughter echoing from the palace. Egypt endures its rulers, changing its people, watching its temples standing guard over all that was and all that will be. You drift to sleep with the image of two pharaohs side by side, one gently fading, one growing brighter, each carrying the hopes, burdens, and mysteries of the two lands. The light in Thebes shifts as months and years slide quietly past the city's stones, slowly accumulating new scars and whispers. You walk the avenues of the temple, noticing small changes, a chiseled face, a vanished name, a row of statues with fresh, rough-hewn features. The scent of lotus and incense still lingers, but now it's overlaid with dust and the quiet anxiety of unfinished prayers. Hatshepsut's presence, once inescapable, begins to thin like morning mist. The old stories are still told, but you sense that not everyone listens the same way anymore. Mainstream fact, damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, was an ancient practice for erasing someone from history, and Hatshepsut became one of its most famous victims. You follow the craftsmen as they work by torchlight, chipping away her images, gouging her name from stelae and monuments. Faces that once looked out over the Nile are scraped flat cartouches, recarved with Thutmose III's titles, as if stone and paint could truly rewrite the past. The work is relentless and, frankly, exhausting. You spot one mason sighing and flexing his wrists, muttering, "She sure had a lot of statues." Quirky tidbit, not all workers are equally diligent. Some, either out of sympathy or simple laziness, leave the faintest traces of her image intact, hidden in shadows, or beneath new paint. There's even a story about a prankster who carved a tiny grinning cat onto the heel of one of Thutmose's new statues, a silent wink to the past, in the least dignified spot imaginable. Historians still argue why Thutmose III and his officials sought so thoroughly to erase Hatshepsut. Was it a calculated move to secure his own legacy, an attempt to restore traditional order, or a personal slight driven by old wounds? Some say it was the priest's idea, eager to emphasize continuity and the god's favor. Others point out the practical fewer claimants, fewer headaches, more room for Thutmose's own triumphs on the monuments. You pass through Deir el-Bahri, the mortuary temple you once watched rise stone by careful stone, now under siege from hammers and chisels. Some statues lose their faces, others their crowns, a few are toppled altogether. In dark corners, you discover half-scraped inscriptions, half-hearted erasures, and sometimes the gentle outline of Hatshepsut's cartouche, barely visible, but impossible to fully erase. You overhear debates among the craftsmen. "It feels wrong," one says, brushing dust from a ruined face. "She built this place." Another shrugs. "Orders are orders." A third older man just shakes his head and whistles. "She'll outlast us all." You wonder if he's right. Quirky fact. In the markets, old women still whisper tales of the queen who dressed as a man sailed to far-off lands and brought the gods to Thebes. Children play games called Finding Hatshepsut, sneaking through alleys and pretending to evade Thutmose's guards. Even the palace cats seem to linger longer by her old statues, as if remembering a different time. Historians still debate the effectiveness of this erasure. In some places, Hatshepsut's name vanishes for centuries, only to resurface in the dusty silence of a tomb or the careful brushstrokes of a modern archaeologist. In others, her story lingers woven into the fabric of Egypt's memory by those who refuse to forget. The palace is quieter now, its halls echoing with new voices, but always just beneath the surface, the ghosts of old ones. You find yourself standing at the edge of a festival, watching Thutmose III celebrated as the restorer, the warrior, the true son of Amun. The people cheer, the priests sing, and the scribes furiously update their records. But as night falls and the crowds disperse, you hear a single flute playing a melody you know from long ago, one that once welcomed a different pharaoh home. You wander back through the city, pausing to touch a wall where Hatshepsut's image was almost but not quite erased. The stone is warm, the outline soft under your fingers, a whisper that refuses to disappear. Memory, you realize, is a stubborn thing. You head to bed beneath a sky scattered with stars, certain that no matter what the records say, some stories will always find their way home. A hush settles over Thebes in these final years, a stillness that feels both like the end of an era and the calm after a storm. You move quietly through the palace, noticing the signs of change. Old friends gone, new faces at court. The tempo of daily life slowed to a gentle drift. Hatshepsut is rarely seen now. Her world narrowed to a suite of shaded rooms and rooftop gardens filled with the scent of blooming papyrus. Time, ever the sly courtier, has woven silver into her hair and softened her footsteps. Yet, in every quiet moment, you sense the echo of what was the laughter at festival banquets, the thrill of new expeditions, the grandeur of a reign that refused to fade quietly into the night. Mainstream fact, Hatshepsut's later years are shrouded in mystery, her health perhaps failing, her influence quietly eclipsed by Thutmose III, who now commands the council, the army, the very pulse of Egypt. Yet even as the world moves on, the queen's legacy lingers in stone and memory. At Deir el-Bahri, the priests keep up the rituals, lighting incense and reciting prayers in her honor, even as her name is scrubbed from official records. Historians still argue whether her last days were peaceful, bitter, or simply reflective of a queen looking back on the sweep of her life with pride, regret, or both. The palace routines continue, but at a slower pace. You watch as Neferure, once a child in Senenmut's arms, takes on new responsibilities, moving with a confidence that echoes her mother's. Old servants recount stories of the days when the palace rang with laughter, and you see in their faces a loyalty that defies the changing winds. Sometimes you catch Hatshepsut herself at sunset, sitting quietly among her lotus pots, fingers tracing the patterns on a clay cup as she listens to the distant music from the riverbanks. Quirky tidbit. In her last years, it's said that Hatshepsut commissioned a special garden on the palace roof, filled with all the strange and beautiful plants brought back from Punt. Some evenings she would walk there alone, her cats trailing behind, pausing to sniff the myrrh and the flowering incense trees. The scent must have carried her back for a moment to the thrill of adventure and the joy of bringing the world to Egypt's doorstep. Life in the city goes on. Merchants still haggle. Priests still chant. The Nile still flows beneath the moon. But you feel the afterglow of Hatshepsut's reign softening the edges of the city, its temples and markets still touched by her boldness and her dreams. The great monuments remain, some scarred, some shining, all bearing witness to a queen who dared to change the course of history, even as others tried to erase her. Historians still debate what Hatshepsut's true legacy is: the builder of great works, the master of royal image, the ruler who broke barriers, the pharaoh who vanished but refused to be forgotten. You hear all these arguments in the bustle of the markets and the whispers in temple courts, but as you sit in the garden at dusk watching the sky turn violet, the answer feels simpler. Hatshepsut endures because her story is woven into every stone, every song, every hopeful heart in Thebes. As night gathers, you find your own resting place beneath the painted ceiling, lotus flowers overhead, the hush of Egypt's eternal night settling in around you. The city quiets, the palace lamps dim, and the Nile glimmers in the distance, always moving, always returning, always carrying memory on its back. Now let everything slow to a gentle hush. Picture yourself reclining in the rooftop garden, the warm air soft on your skin, the faint perfume of myrrh and night-blooming flowers drifting around you. The sounds of Thebes, the laughter, the music, the footsteps fade away, replaced by the comforting rhythm of your own breath and the slow, steady heartbeat of the river far below. Above you, the stars shimmer in the deep indigo sky, ancient and unchanging, as if they remember every story, every secret, every hope ever whispered beneath them. The stones of the palace feel cool and solid beneath you, holding the warmth of countless suns carrying the echo of Hatshepsut's footsteps and your own. You feel safe here, sheltered by the walls of history, cradled by the embrace of all that has come before. Let your thoughts drift loose and unhurried through gardens of memory and dreams. In this gentle stillness, every worry grows soft, every hope finds room to breathe, and you can simply rest, knowing that some stories like the river are never truly lost.